everyone. Welcome back to the Ripened Heart podcast. I'm so excited to be with you all again. And I've been really anticipating this week's episode, which is going to be all about medical astrology. So, how your birth chart corresponds to your health and health ailments that you may be more inclined to or predisposed to, or areas of your body that may need more attention than others. And it can also give you some answers as to things that you can do preventatively, or if you have some sort of mysterious illness or medical problem that you've been working on for a long time and you want a little bit of insight into maybe what the imbalance is being caused by, or at least precipitated by, then medical astrology can be a really, really amazing tool to use. And it's just fascinating to see how truly everything is connected. Everything impacts our physical health, including planetary transits and the energies that surround us on a day-to-day basis, and the energies that were imprinted on you when you were born. And so I'm with Em again today, our resident astrologer here on the podcast, and I'm really excited to dive into it. I think we're going to go through the first 6 signs today, and then there's going to be a part 2 to go over the other 6 signs. And so, I think we're just going to dive into it today. And maybe we could just start the discussion, with a little bit about why we're curious about medical astrology, maybe how we first heard about medical astrology, and how you've seen it be useful. So I've been thinking about this, and we first heard about medical astrology as a concept because back in the day when we were seeing our chiropractor, who is in Chicago, who we first heard about natural health from, I think one of his first questions for us was, "What's your sun sign?" And at the time, we kind of looked at him really perplexed and were like, what? What are you even asking? I didn't have the faintest interest in astrology or anything like that at the time. I think we were like 19 years old in college. And, I just thought he was a little bit quirky. And I just, I told him my birthday. And he's like, "Oh, you're a Pisces." I don't remember if I knew I was a Pisces already, but the concept was very new to me. And he was just so excited about it. And that was one of the things that he emphasized even on his forums. It's something that he really looks at. And do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I remember it and thinking like, oh, this is just woo-woo BS. But then he starts talking about it like over the times that we go into the office, and eventually just kind of like picked up on it, and just it started to come fairly naturally to me. But what he started with was the days of the week, since those have rulership as well as the sun signs. So, each day of the week, for those of you who don't know, we have like Monday is Moon Day, Tuesday is Mars Day, Wednesday is Mercury Day, Thursday is Jupiter Day, Friday is Venus Day, Saturday is Saturn Day, and Sunday is, you guessed it, Sunday. So he started there, and that's not really as much of my focus. I've found that I've just been more curious with the signs themselves, but that was a pretty good introduction. And
yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because I was never skeptical. Maybe I should have been. But I just loved literally everything that came out of that man's mouth. I found everything so fascinating. And because I was a psych student, I was super into Myers-Briggs and all of the personality typing tests. And so basically that's how I viewed astrology. I was like, oh yeah, like this is kind of like being an INFJ or, four wing whatever in Enneagram or, any of those typing tests. And I automatically like resonated with it. And yeah, it was really interesting because the other way that he would use your astrology was based on cell salts. So that brings us back to homeopathy because cell salts are homeopathic preparations of mineral salts. And so there are 12 cell salts that are commonly used, but there are more than that. And they're going to have more of the physical material within them than, say, a higher potency homeopathic would. And so basically, you take these, they're usually in a 6C potency if you've seen them at the store. Highlands is a popular cell salt brand. And essentially, based on your sun sign in astrology, you're more predisposed to be deficient or have an issue with metabolizing that mineral. So, for example, I'm a Pisces, and ferrum phos, or iron phosphate, is the cell salt that I took for a really long time. And sure enough, I did have a lot of symptoms of anemia. And the cool thing about cell salts, though, not to go on too much of a tangent, but the cool thing about them is that they help your body to regulate that substance. So, especially with iron, there can be a lot of problems with supplementing iron because it can lead to side effects, and you can get too much iron very easily. And with iron phosphate, the cell salt, essentially, if you have too much iron, it's going to help your body regulate that. And if you have too little, it'll help your body to uptake more. And so essentially, it's just supporting your body's metabolism of iron. And so then when I would see on my hair analysis, which measures the minerals, I would see that my iron would slowly start to go up. Now, it does take time with those, but so that was kind of our first introduction into like a practical application of your sun sign in astrology, and something that you can do as a preventative or as a helpful measure to, deal with some symptoms that you could be having. And if you're curious to learn more about that, there's a book called Relations of the Mineral Cell Salts of the Body to the Signs of the Zodiac, which is by George Carey. And it's just a little booklet, and basically you can flip to your sign and you can read about the meaning of why that salt was chosen, that mineral salt, and it gives a little description. And with cell salt dosing, it's safe to do. I would say it's a good starting point for like kind of like a homeopathy that you want to do yourself at home without a homeopath. But the rule of thumb is to take a dose 5 days a week and then take a break on the weekends. And so that way you kind of give your body a break. And I really don't advise to do more than one at a time because you just want to see how your body responds to it. It's a very gentle medicine, but you want to see because, sometimes there can be a little bit of healing symptoms at first as your body adjusts. And I've even found that going to my rising sign and looking at that description can be helpful too. I definitely resonated with that as well. And Em will get into it more, but it is more than just your sun sign. It's the placements in your birth chart in general. It's a complicated science. It really, really is. So we just kind of wanted to dive in and give a general introduction today. But I did want to mention the cell salt piece because it's the first way that we used it, and it's something that you can take away from this episode and really utilize yourself and try it out yourself. But you only want to, take the cell salt if it resonates and if the symptoms match. If you're not having symptoms, there's no need to take it, So it's just something to be aware of. And yeah, cell salts are really, really useful in general. So I definitely recommend looking into them. But moving on from the cell salt piece, do you want to dive into Aries, which is the first sign that we're going to cover in today's episode?
Yeah, sure. So Aries rules over the head, the skull, the eyeballs, the upper jaw, and the teeth of the upper jaw. So Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. And if you even think about, just a normal, healthy birth, a baby comes out into this world head first. Granted, that can change, due to breaching or, there's much more C-sections nowadays, but just in general, thinking in terms of we come into this world via the head. And so, you know, and thinking metaphorically in terms of Aries, like it's kind of like you, since it's an initiating energy, it's like you're diving head first into something. When you think about the language that we use in describing just our actions, like all of these idioms that we have in our language, it tends to even match some of these signs, which I find interesting. But in terms of where Aries can go wrong, well, it's usually like things like a lot of headaches or head tension or even concussions. And I mean, I'm an Aries rising, and I mean, when I was born, the first thing they noticed was how big my head was. So they had to measure it and make sure I was okay. But then they measured my dad's head and realized, oh, it's just genetic. um, but I as a child, I had a concussion as well. So that's can be something that an Aries or someone with a lot of Aries energy can end up dealing with.
Oh yeah, and I mean, we're both Aries rising. I have an Aries moon, and that's like my go-to symptom is like tension headaches. I had a concussion. I've fainted and hit my head. I mean, basically everything has been concentrated up there. Even though I'm Pisces, yes, I've had some Pisces related things, which we'll get to as well. But it's just interesting because it's like you look at this and the correlations and you're like, holy crap, that literally describes me. And it can just be helpful to be aware of that. I mean, I've seen like Aries kids who just like, they really do go headfirst into everything. They're rambunctious. They get into trouble. They tumble with their friends. They're more likely to be in sports because of that Aries aggression, that Mars energy. And so, of course, they're going to be more prone to injury, right? I mean, it's like they're kind of just like, they're tough.
Accident prone.
But they're tough too, so it kind of balances it out because isn't it one of the more like resilient of the signs?
Yes, it is. Definitely. And another thing about Aries is given that it rules the first house, that's like the first impression that you leave upon people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's interesting that it represents, or it rules over the eyes. And when you think about, when you first meet someone, like you're looking at their eyes, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like the first thing that draws you in. So that's just another thing.
Yeah, and even like, there can be a lot of anger with Aries. With the fire signs in general, but I would say Aries is more notorious for that. And I notice, like, when I'm more of my fiery Aries self, I can have a tendency to that tension headache and that even like, and it's interesting because my headaches will even affect my vision. And so it's very literal. And before we started recording, we're recording during a Mercury retrograde in Gemini. And whenever I hear our neighbors... that Aries fire gets triggered into me, I'm like, ooh, right before we started recording that, like I was feeling that, and it's just really funny because it's like you can feel the tension build as an Aries, like with strong Aries placements. It's just like you've got to find an outlet for that, and that's why things like athletics and sports and movement is so key. It's really key.
even think about it as a hothead.
Yeah.
Like a fire
100%.
sign, it
Yeah.
rules the head, hothead.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. 100%.
next we can go into Taurus, which in general rules the neck area, but also the ears, the lower jaw, the salivary glands, taste buds, vocal cords. So Taurus is known for things like having good taste in things because it's ruled by Venus. So we literally are talking about taste buds because like it's even like, kind of Taurus is very like it's more about the material world and your five sense orientation. So we have the taste buds in there is interesting. It's also part of it is digestion when it comes to Taurus. So that's going to be like the food you ingest through your mouth, but you need your lower jaw to chew. And then ears, in terms of like listening and vocal cords, they tend to be good singers. Not all, but
interesting, really?
But a lot of Taurus is kind of like that sign of like the good singer. Doesn't mean that you're going to be a good singer, but it could mean
more likely.
More likely, yes.
Very interesting. Is there any other sign that has that? Like, would Gemini too?
That's a good question.
Maybe, but they're better speakers, not necessarily sing, because it's not the...
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Gemini is more of the mental aspect of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I imagine the digestion can come from overindulgence with Taurus.
Yes, exactly. They tend to have like sweet tooths or they have a sweet tooth. Or just like
they have more than one sweet tooth.
Sweet teeth. Some of it can be issues. I mean, think about the with overconsumption, but just think about the neck area too. It's like, well, you have the thyroid gland there, so a lot of thyroid issues can be a Taurus related problem.
So with these, I don't know if you can answer this or not. I know it's kind of complex, but when, say, a Taurus has thyroid issues, is that a sign that their Taurian energy is imbalanced in some way? Or is it just because Taurus rules those body parts and so they're going to be more prone to weakness or deficiency in some way?
That's a really good question, and I'm actually going to say that the answer is both.
Yeah.
Why? Because this, like the way... So it's interesting. We really learned astrology through medical astrology. Like that was our introduction into astrology.
Yeah, it was.
But then like getting more towards like the personality aspect and life in general, when it comes to astrology, it's both. It's both because, you just see how it's like, just kind of like the mind-body dynamic even, or even just as above, so below. So we have thoughts that can contribute to problems in our body, or just experiences like traumas and can show up with those themes in certain parts of our body as well. So yeah, and interestingly enough, like you can use this to go and track transits, which would be the current alignment of the planets and how those affect your birth chart specifically. And you can see when certain things are flaring up for you or they have in the past, and you might find that there's some correlation there between like there is a hard Taurus transit for you. Even now we have Uranus in Taurus.
That's exactly what you read my mind. I was just gonna ask you that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that can Uranus is like the planet of chaos and just like it's unpredictable.
It's that surprise shock element.
Exactly. So it can bring up issues, in terms of, maybe more random cases of thyroid issues for people. So I wouldn't be surprised if people nowadays are experiencing that more so than they
And that's
have
for
in the
people
past.
in general, not just for Taurus and suns.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Because if there's a harsh transit that's impacting maybe your chart in somewhere where, let's say, for example, you have second house issues. Maybe you're afraid of losing your job. It rules finances.
Mm-hmm.
And Uranus being in your second house of Taurus, say, if you're an Aries rising like Em and I are, there could be a shakeup to your finances, and then that could cause some Taurus-related health issues. Perhaps.
Yes, that's definitely possible.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, shall we move to Gemini?
Sure. So Gemini rules over the hands, the arms, fingers, the lungs, your actual speech and hearing. So it's kind of similar to Taurus with that, but it's it's, how do I put this? It's not like it's not the sound as we were kind of talking about before, where it's like, do you have a pretty voice, a pretty singing voice? It's more like speech in terms of like, I'm fumbling over my words or not, sort of speech. Or hearing. Do you have hearing issues?
Conveying a concept, articulation.
Exactly. And it also rules over the voluntary nerves. So with Gemini, it's like, this is the sign of learning and communication. So think about your hands and how you use them to write, you use them to type, to text, even to accentuate your speech. You use your hands, like I'm even doing right now. And in terms of since it rules over your speech and your hearing, which is so important in order to learn. And lungs, I mean, we need to breathe in general, but yes, you do need to inhale and exhale, like, in order to have conversations. So these things, like, once again, just tend to be so metaphorical, in terms of how they show up in the body. Like, that's one of the coolest things I've noticed, and why, that's just the way that I've been able to learn this as well. So,
and I've even heard a couple of patients that I've shadowed, they'll mention, we get patients every so often that are astrologically savvy. And I remember this particular patient who always brought up her Pluto transits. She would have these hard Pluto transits, and she would write in her journal, about the symptoms that started flaring up around her Pluto transits. It's something that she tracked in particular. And so it's just so interesting how this can show up in a very real way. And it's not like, oh, I'm a Gemini, so I'm going to have problems with my hands, better brace myself, or like, it's not something to worry about at all, actually. It's just like, if you're trying to troubleshoot an issue, this is something to consult and look at, and it's just a perspective. And it means that there's a solution to it. Like, it's not just like, you're doomed to have thyroid issues because you're a Taurus. Good luck. Bye. No, it's like, oh, like, okay, there's something that can be done about it. Or if you're like, why am I tired? It's like, maybe you should look at your thyroid, or maybe you should see a homeopath. I don't know. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so my mom is a Gemini, so she's got Sun in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini. I believe she even has South Node in Gemini.
Does she really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I know that like carpal tunnel has been one of the things that has come up for her. So, once again, we're talking about the hands here because she, uses her computer so often, but...
to communicate.
Exactly. Exactly. So Gemini issues they can also be like learning disabilities, things like that. And just having like trouble communicating, or, sometimes it's a stutter, or, anything that would cause you to like have trouble like focusing as well, because they kind of are like kind of jumping to one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and get a little lost and unfocused. So it can be hard for them to kind of like feel grounded.
It's like, do you need Adderall, or are you just a Gemini?
Exactly.
Or a manifesting Gemini.
Exactly. Okay, and then another thing, it's not to say that all Geminis are like this, but and another thing that I think can be common, it's just something I've noticed even with Gemini types, even just Mercurial types, since Mercury rules Gemini as well as Virgo. And Gemini rules the lungs. I've noticed a lot of people tend to like to smoke more so.
Yeah.
And I kind of think it's just like this need to talk and just to calm down. So it's just something interesting. And I'm not hating on Geminis or even caring so much about that. It's just something that I've observed. I notice that they tend to like smoking. So
It's like Gemini smokes cigarettes and Pisces smokes weed.
yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
And the next one is Cancer. And Cancer rules over the stomach, the breasts, water retention, the womb, temperature regulation of the body, and the cycle, the woman's menstrual cycle. So Cancer Cancer is referring to like nurturing and the mother and your home life, the domestic sphere. So when you think about the fact that it rules the stomach, well, that's like, thinking in terms of nourishment, quite literally. And then, breasts would be like breastfeeding a child. And because even because Cancer's ruled by the moon, and you think about like how the moon affects the tides, and so there's like these things in terms of like water retention. So it's just like seeing that in nature and how it's actually like represented in our body, and even in the monthly cycle.
Yeah, because that's even linked to the lunar cycle.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I wonder if they would experience an increase in symptoms around newer full moons.
Yeah.
That's like a classic homeopathy rubric, is some remedies worse at full moon, worse at new moon. Their symptoms will act up, and so I wonder if that's more common in a Cancer sun or strong Cancer placements.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would say so. And just even like, yeah, so we've got the womb, and once again we're referring to like maternity, so these things are quite literal at times. And temperature regulation of the body, this one actually I thought of as like, because Cancer rules over your home, like, why do we need a shelter? Like, why did humans seek out shelter in general? It was to protect, it's a barrier from the extreme temperatures in nature that we experience. So that's the way I've seen that in terms of the temperature regulation of the body.
Makes sense.
Yeah. or and then even the word Cancer, I've always, because I'm a sun in Cancer, I've got Venus and South Node of Cancer as well, but I've always kind of had an issue with that word, because I say, oh, I'm a Cancer, and then it just sounds like, like I don't want to say that, but in terms of like, I don't want to make that my mantra, but it's interesting when I think about that, though, because when Cancer forms in the body, it's like the cells are copying and just making copies. They're not themselves, they're not unique. And in terms of like the Cancer zodiac, like you're caring for other people, and you don't really have so much time to care for yourself if you're not a healthy Cancer that does take the time to nourish yourself. And so I just kind of found that fascinating when it comes to the sign of Cancer. All right. And next we've got Virgo. Or I'm so sorry. We have Leo.
Don't forget Leo. They're gonna.
I know, how ironic. Leo rules the back, like in general, the spine, and the heart. And I mean, Leo, first of all, tends to have pretty good health in general. It's like the fire signs do tend to be pretty strong in terms of their vitality. But when it comes to Leo, they're very proud, and they do kind of like, they come from the heart. And so when you think about, let's just talk about like, since they're like the leader in terms of one of the main leaders in the zodiac, it's like when someone is like feels accomplished and they're proud of themselves and who they are, they stand tall. And even like if you have no sense of pride, you're bent over, and you even have like poor posture. And so I find that one very interesting when it comes to Leo, is like because it could even go too much pride, where it's like, you think of someone just like standing up super straight and just
looking
like,
down on you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, looking down on you. And in terms of the heart, like, it just kind of, it's just like they have like a zest for life and sense of joy. And even in Chinese medicine, it's like the heart emotion is joy. So I noticed that correlation there. But yeah, it's, the person who doesn't have a strong Leo would, likely have some back problems, and just like things that would help would be like working on like the flexibility of the spine even. Because I even remember like, our doctor's wife, who kind of really taught us to think like this in general.
Yeah.
She would say like to work on the flexibility of your spine, and talk about how that's like, there's like you can tell when someone just doesn't feel good about themselves, but in their posture. So yeah, I know it's like she said that.
It's like that curled in posture, even like rounded shoulders, protecting the heart, protecting yourself from being vulnerable. And also, it's just the flexibility of the spine is so important, and there's so many good ways to do that, and it helps you to bring out more of that positive Leo quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, so Leo's also like the sign of romance too. So once again, some of these things are pretty literal. And then going into Virgo, Virgo rules the pancreas, the lower lobes of the liver, upper intestines, the sympathetic nervous system.
So that's like the fight or flight.
Right. And co-rules the immune system with Pisces. So when you think about Virgo as a sign, they actually, they tend to be pretty sturdy because they're very often very interested in health. Virgo is a sign of your health, particularly when we're referring to acute health, as in Virgo's 6th house, because it rules over the 6th house. And another thing with Virgo is like they're taking in, it's ruled by Mercury, so they're taking in information, they're analyzing, they're getting all their ducks in a row, they're very detail oriented. And if you think about, let's just take the small intestines, what is that doing? That's it's absorbing your nutrients. So you're taking in that information that's necessary, and not taking in what the small intestine is very it's very sensitive, so it's not going to take in the things that it doesn't need. So that right there is very Virgoan, and just even so many, this is like, because it's the sign of health, like wanting to take care of their themselves in general. It's like, that to me just says like immune system right there. But and just because like they have kind of the, in terms of they have pretty good boundaries, I would say, as well. And so when you think about immune system and needing boundaries there in your sort of your defense from attack. So and then in terms of the sympathetic nervous system and kind of your fight or flight, Virgos can be a bit they can be a bit prone to things like anxiety, because they can be just more nervous or like really trying hard to be perfect. So they can struggle with that, and just having a lot of trouble, like just kind of letting go and just taking it easy,
and a lot of self-criticism.
Exactly. Yes,
nitpickiness to themselves or others.
Exactly.
And that leads them to wanting to control the situation.
Controlling, yes, exactly.
And when you're talking about the intestine as well, that would lead me to believe that then there could be a greater potential of deficiency of nutrients in an unhealthy Virgo.
Right. Yes.
Makes sense. Well, I think that is where we're going to leave it for part 1. In part 2, we're going to dive into the remaining 6 signs. I really, really hope that this was helpful. Let me know what your sun sign is, or if you've noticed any of these issues in yourself, if this resonated. I would love to hear from you. And share this with a friend who you think would benefit from this information. And we will see you guys in part 2. Take care.